Hey guys, so this lecture will be about conducting interviews. And in anthropology, interviews are the foundation of establishing knowledge about a specific culture. So, writing ethnographies, um, it requires doing observations, but also doing interviews because sometimes what people say is different from what they actually do. So, to find out like where the truth is at a particular time and space requires both things. So, let's move on to conducting interviews. So before doing your interviews, you need to find out a little bit about who the person or people that you will be interviewing, who they are, right? So you need to think about the profession, where they live, the area where they live, and what historic events might have shaped their lives. So going in with a little bit of knowledge will inform your initial questions and follow-up questions for your interviewees. Remembering from the beginning of the semester that all people have biases, implicit biases, or assumptions. So even researchers have biases, but it doesn't mean that we have to act upon them. And being aware of them actually helps us not act on them. However, you don't have to abandon these things completely because they can lead to interesting observations, new information, and ways of thinking about things that we've never thought about before. So one of the jobs of the researcher is to reveal the biases or assumptions that reveal the interviewee's perspective and the overall culture. So what information are we seeking from the interviewees as a anthropologist? Well, we are seeking stories because anthropology is qualitative as opposed to quantitative science. So qualitative means that we're looking for rich description. We're seeking stories. We're seeking firsthand narratives of specific things that are related to a culture or a community. We're looking for insider knowledge, so the insider perspective, the emic perspective. And we're also looking for historic knowledge. So even though the history is usually written down, history and historians have their own biases, right? And they look at written documents. But there's a lot that you can learn from a community by speaking to elders, and because there are a lot of people that hold knowledge, hold historic knowledge within their own stories. So your job as the interviewer is to elicit that information. So first off, who are you going to interview? The easiest thing to do is find somebody that you already have a rapport with. Um, Rapport is very important, and that's basically a comfort and a trust between two people or one or more people. So if you can find a person or a few people that you're comfortable interviewing, um, from there you can ask that person who might be an acceptable person with the knowledge that you're trying to elicit. Find those people. So it becomes like a kind of web. This type of interviewing is called snowballing. And so when you interview people, you also want to think about like what your goal is and what you're going to call them. So, in when anthropology was first established in the early 1800s in the United States, so people were subjects, and that meant that it really showed a hierarchical relationship where the scientist or the anthropologist was a peer, and then the people that were helping to provide the knowledge were the subjects. Since the 1970s, that dynamic has really changed because there was this hierarchical relationship. Um, People saw that actually we're getting the people up here, the scientists and anthropologists, they're getting knowledge from the people down here. And really, we need to balance that out, because without those people down here, those anthropologists aren't going to have anything. And so then they became to be called informants. However, this is not necessarily, there's still like a little bit of a difference between power relationships, because they're just informing, right? They don't have any collaboration, and they're not participants in the research. But yeah, so more recently, the the power dynamics have leveled out. So people call anthropologists and other scientists will call the people that are providing the knowledge, providing the space, they call them participants or collaborators. And this just helps to equalize things and erase those power dynamics. So in the photographs here are some people from my research. Here's me interviewing one of my collaborators, a young lady in South Africa. I got to go to the Trevor Noah show in South Africa. So that's my husband. Some of y'all might recognize him, Joe Stallman, with Trevor Noah. And then picture right below me, so the bottom left, is my grandfather, who I interviewed. And then a cavity festival in South Africa that my husband and I went, and we're kind of like observers because there's a lot of Indians in South Africa, and they make up part of the larger South African context. And so I wanted to find out, about all the types of people that are in the nation to make a more informed ethnography. So the people that you interview and the people that you observe don't necessarily have to be part of your culture, but they will inform you about the culture that you are focusing on, because they're looking in as outsiders, and they can give you a really good perspective or interesting insights into the community that you're looking at. So how do we get at that information? How do we get at those stories? How do we get at the firsthand knowledge of people? So there's some strategies for retrieving information. Make sure that you have your questions. And so that allows for structure. But also remember, flexibility is important, because there might be something that comes up in a question or an answer, a response to your question, that you might want to like dig in a little bit deeper. And so allowing for flexibility gives you the ability to get that qualitative information out there. So with that said, you got to prepare a set of questions and make sure that you are listening to catch important and interesting information so that you can expand. Having a pen and paper helps so that you can write notes, or having a phone, having a recording so that you can record the information, listen to it later on, which might give you the ability to go back and re-interview that person about the specific thing that you have in mind that you didn't hear while you were catching the note, writing the notes. So how do you get the stories? How do you get that insider knowledge? Well, first of all, you have to have rapport, right? So that just means, like you're able to have trust and relationship between those two people, the interviewer and the interviewee. We ask questions every day, but sometimes questions can be challenging, depending on especially who you're interviewing. So prepare those questions ahead of time. I usually like to say about 10 questions. And then you're going to start off with basic questions, which gets to people's demographics. How old they are, where do they live, where were they born, do they have any siblings? So those are kind of basic questions, right? And then there's some questions that you want to get that deeper knowledge, right? To get that insider knowledge. So these are called in-depth questions. Some of the things that you want to avoid are leading questions. So a leading question is a question that prompts or encourages the desired answer. I'll give you an example. Living in rural Pennsylvania has a lot of challenges, right? Or what type of challenges do you encounter in rural PA? So how this is a leading question is because you, as the interviewer, are focusing or forcing your interviewee to focus on the challenges of living in rural PA rather than the benefits of living in a rural PA. A non-leading question would be something like, hey, please describe for me what it's like living in rural PA. And then, only then, if they talk about the challenges, can you start asking them, like, hey, can you describe some of those challenges? Or, hey, you mentioned this challenge, can you like dive into that a little bit deeper? And then loaded questions. So loaded questions are similar to leading questions, where you want to avoid bringing these up before your informant does, because you're, again, forcing your participant to go in a specific direction rather than allowing it to organically happen and them to organically take you on this story journey. So an example of a loaded question is, your culture's on the verge of collapse, correct? Or do you think your culture is better than other cultures? That's forcing them to kind of take on either a defensive posture or ethnocentric posture, right? So a better question that is not loaded but elicits similar information about the relationship between the insider culture and the outsiders would be, can you describe the relationship between your culture or community and the communities that differ from yours? Another way is, what is the relationship between your culture / community and the neighboring communities or cultures? The problem with this question, though, is you may need to ask a follow-up question to get them to explain more, because in theory, they could just say, in relation to, like, what's your relationship with your surrounding communities? They could either say, oh, it's good, or it's bad. If they do go into detail, then maybe you don't need a follow-up. However, maybe they say something that allows you to ask them to expand a little bit more. Another type of question to avoid would be yes or no questions. So these are called closed questions, or questions that elicit a one-word answer. So what's your favorite color? Blue or brown? That could be an answer, right? How are you feeling today? I'm feeling good, or I'm feeling bad. Did you go to the store today? The answer is either yes or no. So you really want to provide your informants with open-ended questions. So things like, please describe X, Y, or Z, or questions that begin with how or why are usually those open questions that will elicit the insider knowledge. Another way to get information is by asking people, by showing them a thing. For instance, here's this sticker. What does it remind you of? Or have you ever had this type of candy before? What type of memories does it bring? Or even showing specific photographs of people or places to get them to think about things a little bit more. If you have photo albums, or if they have photo albums, kind of going through the photo albums with them and asking, like, hey, who's that person? That could also be a great way of eliciting information and getting those in-depth stories to find out about people's cultures. So one thing that's important about interviewing is listening. So um, listening is a skill because not all listening is equal, right? Um, some people just listen so that they can hear a break within the conversation to insert themselves and assert their own knowledge or assert their own opinions or create some sort of power dynamic. In ethnographic interviewing, that's not what we're trying to get at. We're trying to establish rapport, number one, so that number two, you can get that in-depth knowledge of your interviewees and about their culture, right? So, two types of listening. There's passive listening, where you're just hearing a person speak without engaging your mind. You're just listening, again, for a break to assert your own opinions. Um, and then active listening is you're mindfully engaging with the speaker, and you're possibly relating things in your mind, relating things you hear to things you've observed or experienced, or you've read about. So that's why it's important to do your background research before going into your interviews. So, and also recording your interviews so that when you're taking notes and you hear something, oh, that's interesting, you're able to make a note of like, oh, I heard that before with the interviewee before this guy, or saying, writing down in your notes, oh, in this book, X, they said the same exact thing. So it must be a recurring thing that happens within this culture, right? Another point about active listening is it enables the listener to think about follow-up questions, to go more in depth about a thing. And it enables a person to be flexible with regard to those follow-up questions. This all leads me to assignment number 2. So the steps, first of all, you need to decide on what culture to immerse yourself within or what community based on either your personal interest or your access. Number 2, you need to do your background research. So find out about the community that you're looking into. Look through archives, books, online databases. Go visit your library. Find help from your librarian to point you to different resources. Look through the news articles. Google Scholar is a great place to go for peer-reviewed articles. There's that Google News where you can type in a search and find all the news that's specific to that community. And then number 3, figure out what you want to focus on because there's researching a community or a ethnic group or culture can be very big. So maybe you want to focus on something that you're interested in. So maybe it's the healthcare within your community. Develop some sort of a hypothesis based on your background research. So perhaps, let's say we're talking about rural Pennsylvania. There are multiple challenges within rural Pennsylvania for people to get adequate health care. However, communities decide to take things into their own hands. And so maybe that's what you begin to focus your attention on, how people like do their own home health care, right? Homeopathic medicine. Maybe you have, instead of like doctors or nurses, you have healers, traditional healers, right? Who use traditional remedies. It's up to you. And then where? So think about where the best places to find the information that will align with your hypothesis. So again, if you're focusing on healthcare, maybe it's best to examine places where people are getting care. So that could be in hospitals, could be in clinics, it can be in senior homes, it could be like the neighbor down the road who is the person who creates herbal remedies, right? Who all the community goes to for the remedies. Next, you want to go do some observations. So observations are basically you're just kind of sitting there watching and you're taking notes, right? Detailed notes, field notes. You should visit that place at least 3 times. to create or to find out some sort of a pattern. Record the interactions through your field notes, through recording on your phone, either audio or video. If you have a camera, you can include that. These will be things that are great for using in your ethnographic film, because you can cut to specific like interviews, people speaking about specific things, or showing pictures of your field notes, showing images, still images of the places that you sat and observed, right? And then find the people that will help give you that in-depth knowledge. It should be people that are willing to speak to you, right? And these questions that you have developed after doing your background information, you'll be asking your informants. Participant observation. So this is another method that you can engage within, and that could be something where you're actually doing while observing. So let's say it's like you're doing some research about the herbal remedies within the community, where you found a person who's a homeopath, who's like a natural healer, who community members recognize as a traditional healer, and they've invited you to prepare some herbal remedies. Maybe, if with their consent, you can record that interaction, or you're just actually making the herbal remedies, and then you go home, or go to your car or whatever, and then you write down all the information that you can remember after the interaction. After you've done that, you review, you create some sort of an outline or a storyboard. There's a storyboard kind of example on the right corner, the upper right corner, where you're just drawing a little box and you're putting in, like the like stick figures or information that you want to, the notes that you want to have your information. So you should structure your outline and storyboard just like you would for a paper. So you should have an intro, your body, paragraphs with your supporting evidence, and then your conclusion, right? So you're going to do the same thing with your film. So if you have a nice map to kind of guide you through it, it'll make things much easier. If you want, you can create a PowerPoint kind of like this. That could be your kind of storyboard. And hopefully you'll figure out a way to create something amazing and wonderful. And then you can record everything, write down a script if you need it. Some people do really well with scripts. Other people, an outline is sufficient, and you can just read through it and kind of free talk. It's really about what's best for you. So kind of figure that out, and then have fun with this. Again, find things that are interesting to you, because it'll make this project way easier. And if you have any issues or need a little bit more guidance, feel free to reach out to me, and I will help you do it. Thank you.